So recently, Glitch has announced that Murder Drones is getting a graphic novel adaptation, and with it, Murder Drones fans and YouTubers are mindlessly echoing the sentiment that Murder Drones is back and revived, and if that were the case, this would be a positive video. But that isn't the case. In fact, that couldn't be farther from the truth because the Murder Drones graphic novel isn't a continuation, a sequel, or a prequel. It's a retelling. Now, I don't have a problem inherently with Murder Drones being adapted into comic book form. In fact, I was one of the many people who wanted there to be a Murder Drones comic adaptation because it would be a cheaper way to explore the Murder Drones world as opposed to funding more animated content. But where the issue lies is that Glitch has approved of there being a Murder Drones comic, but of all the ideas they could have chosen for this graphic novel, they made the most creatively bankrupt, low effort, and unsatisfying decision they could have possibly decided on, with it being a retelling of the show's story, and it just makes me ask, why? Why is this being made? What value does it offer that the original series doesn't have? Retelling the same story again in comic book form? Really? This is the kind of thing that Disney does with their movies a couple of months after they leave theaters for an easy cash grab, only for them to sit on shelves for months on end before they either get thrown away or donated. It's like one of the laziest and cheapest things that literally every major corporation does with their franchises. Now, I'm sure there is going to be someone who tries to disprove the arguments I make by using examples like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, or any superhero movie as examples of why adaptations are effective at expanding on their source material, but this is completely different. The reason everyone loves when novels and comics are adapted into shows or movies is because there is far more creative depth that can be visualized in those mediums, and that is going to be a major talking point later in this video. But have you ever, throughout your entire life, watched a movie or a show and said, "Wow, I can't wait for the comic book adaptation of that"? In fact, I can't even think of a comic book adaptation of a movie or show that has ever improved upon its source material so much that it was worth fans' money or time. There have been instances where there have been comic book continuations of popular animated shows, like Invader Zim, the Powerpuff Girls, or Gravity Falls, but what made all those comics valuable is that they all told original stories that took place in the universe of their source material. They offered something substantially new and different enough to warrant their creation because that's what fans wanted. This, however, is the exact opposite of what fans wanted. Most of the Murder Drones fandom wanted a Murder Drones comic, but they wanted new material. Everyone was asking for a spin-off or a continuation, but you know what literally nobody wanted from a comic adaptation? A retelling. Like, if you were given the choice for a Murder Drones comic series and you got to pick between a continuation, a spin-off, a prequel, or a retelling, can you guess what would be the least voted for option? It would be the one we are ending up getting. But Vanitymoth, you cry, desperate to defend the company that gave you the last thing you wanted. Aren't you being a little harsh? Don't you know? Since it's a retelling, it has the opportunity to explore perspectives we never saw before or fix problems with the original series. Well, yes, I have thought about that, and you are right. This graphic novel does have the opportunity to add more to the world and maybe even improve on it, but if we are going to acknowledge that possibility, we have to acknowledge that this comic isn't being written by Liam. And as far as we know, Liam has no involvement in this comic whatsoever, meaning that unless Liam expressively gave permission to Glitch to take creative liberties, doing so could be considered creatively hijacking his vision, which in all fairness, Glitch has every right to do, as Liam is only the creator of Murder Drones, while Glitch are the owners of Murder Drones. But from at least a fan perspective, this would also mean that any deviations from the original show could be considered non-canon, as these alterations were never intended by the creator to be a part of the story. And there is nothing wrong with that, but it does bring up the question, if Glitch is willing to make a Murder Drones project without Liam's involvement, and Glitch along with the fans are fine with recognizing any differences it has are non-canon, then why doesn't Glitch just make a non-canon original story or spin-off that takes place in the Murder Drones universe? So while yes, there can be differences within this graphic novel that add value and could justify its existence, at the same time, if Glitch is fine with a Murder Drone story being created that doesn't have Liam's involvement and is allowed to be different from its source material, why go with the laziest and most creatively uninteresting option available? If it really is so much to ask for a spin-off, could they have at the very least had some more fun with the opportunity they have and do something that is different while also being respectful to the source material? Just for example, if you had to choose between the dubiously faithful retelling we are getting or a retelling of Murder Drones, but the entire story is being portrayed from Sin's perspective, so we get to see what she was doing before she flew to Copper 9 during the first 2 episodes, and getting to see how the meeting between her, Jay, and Doll went presumably during the events of episode 4, which would you pick? Now, before I move on to my next point, I want to clarify that I mean no disrespect towards the artist and writer of this adaptation, as they are just doing their jobs, and I don't have anything against comics or graphic novels themselves, but by transferring Murder Drones into the comic medium, this is creating a worse version of the product because some of Murder Drones' best aspects are going to be lost along the way, such as the voice acting of the cast. I may still think Michael Kovac as N was a miscast, but everyone else in this series did a stellar job voicing their characters, and to experience Murder Drones without them wouldn't be the same in a bad way. But on top of that, voices aren't the only auditory aspect of the series that would be lost. The music of Murder Drones is perhaps one of the most distinctive aspects of the show. It more than pulled its weight from the first episode to the last, and to experience this series without that aspect could be devastating to some of the best scenes of the show. Do you really think that the prom fight would have been close to as good as it is without the knife dance music playing in the background? Would V's sacrifice have been nearly as emotional without the presence of Can You Set Me Free? And would the final fight against Sin even work without the Nightcore of Bite Me? It doesn't matter how beautifully the panels are illustrated, there is nothing this graphic novel could offer that could ever make up for the loss of the music within this show, as there are multiple scenes throughout the series that were directed to work with the audio design, and that creative vision will be lost in this adaptation. So that brings me to ask you a very simple question. And I'm not asking this question as a Murder Drones fan, a graphic novel fan, or as a fan of entertainment. I am asking this question to you as a person. Would you pay money for a worse version of a product that is available for free? Of all the things I have said and will say in this video, that question is the most important point I am going to make here. Murder Drones cannot be enjoyed to its full capacity in a graphic novel form because Liam wrote this series to be enjoyed as a show, not as a comic. Therefore, no matter how Murder Drones is adapted into this medium, it will never be as good as its original version, especially since Liam himself isn't even involved. So it's fair to come to the conclusion, with the lack of voice acting, lack of music, lack of the animation prowess that made the fight scenes look as good as they did, and the lack of the original creator, this is the definitively inferior version of Murder Drones as a series, and you are going to have to pay for it. That in of itself should be reason enough not to buy this comic. But unfortunately, that isn't how the standardless consumer thinks. They think that one should be happy, grateful even, that we are being graced with more content to spend our money on, and I get it. I was one of those people who was begging for a J plush, and I bought every signed Murder Drones poster that was available. But the difference here is that Murder Drones is already available for free, and it's the better version of the show. So why should we be grateful to have the opportunity to pay money for a version of Murder Drones that is missing multiple of its defining features? This is no better than Disney making inferior live-action versions of their animated movies and expecting you not only to be excited for it, but for you to pay for it, when the original version is not only better, but much cheaper. Murder Drones is a free series. The only thing it requires is an internet connection. Why would you pay for a worse version? And before anyone uses the excuse that they are buying it to support glitch or indie animation, let me remind you that originally all merch sales went towards funding the future of the show. But Murder Drones has been over for nearly a year. So your money is just going to Glitch, who is already being funded by Amazon. Buying this graphic novel isn't supporting Murder Drones or indie animation. It's just buying into Glitch's greed and shameless milking of a dead series. The only adaptation of this show that is justifiably worth paying money for is if Glitch released a physical DVD version of the show, because at least then you would still be enjoying Murder Drones the way it was meant to be enjoyed by the series creator, along with being able to watch it offline, instead of paying money for a downgrade that the creator had no part of. This supposed revival, as everyone is calling it, is less of a brand new era for Murder Drones and more like Glitch parading around the show's decaying corpse like a carrot on a stick so they can milk Murder Drones fans dry for money that they don't even need. The only way this adaptation can justify its existence for any artistic reason is if it adds on to the existing story in a meaningful way, and when I say that, I don't mean a single new line of dialogue for every episode, I mean entirely new perspectives, entirely new conversations between characters, and explanations on plot details that were poorly explained or brushed over in the original series. It has to offer substantial differences, and if this adaptation does all that, then this project is more for the better than it is for the worse, and I will be glad it exists. But if it doesn't, and it just ends up being a shallow rehash of a story that is already finished, then there is no reason for any Murder Drones fan to buy this. There is always the possibility that maybe you want to buy this comic because you just want to see Murder Drones in a new art style, and I think that's fine. That's probably the most reasonable excuse someone could use to rationalize buying this product, but if you really care so much just about the illustrations to the point where you are willing to pay money for it, you can at the very least donate $10 to your favorite Murder Drones fan artist or fan project, because they at least are doing it out of pure passion and are creating new and original ideas surrounding Murder Drones, as opposed to Glitch, who are only making this comic out of greed that they mask as passion. But that isn't the point of this video. This video isn't me telling you not to buy this graphic novel, as I already know that with all fandoms, fans will buy whatever they are given just for the sake of having it, no matter how effortless or low quality the product is, and I already know there will be plenty of people who will watch this video and only support the graphic novel more to spite me, and if that's what you want to do with your money, go ahead. It's your money. I am not inconvenienced by the poor financial choices of others. So I know it's pointless to ask anyone not to buy this product, so you may ask, what is the point of this video? What am I actually trying to say? The point I am trying to convey is that Glitch is becoming more and more like a lazy, insincere, money-hungry company, and no product besides the Animanies represent that more than this graphic novel. Also, with how many people are blowing this adaptation out of proportion and over-exaggerating its importance, it felt necessary for someone to come along and point out how creatively vacuous this product actually is. Like I said, I'm not going to tell you not to buy this product, because if you have made it this far in the video and have listened to the points I have made, I shouldn't have to. I would love to be proven wrong, because if I am, we would be getting a product made with creative experimentation made out of passion instead of greed, and Murder Drones fans would get a worthwhile product that is captivating and inspiring. instead of a lazy, uninspired cash grab devoid of creativity or passion and made with no other intent other than making money by disrespectfully desecrating a series that deserves better.
Ugh.